Welcome. You're listening to the Enlightened Loveheart and Soul Show. I'm your host, Crystalline Diamondloveheart, and our special guest today is Magenta Pixie. And Magenta Pixie is an intuitive consultant and a consciousness channel for the white-winged collective consciousness of 9. Thank you for being here, Magenta. It's such a pleasure for you to be here.
Thank you, Crystalline. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
You're very welcome. And Magenta is also the author of 2 books, Masters of the Matrix, and her latest book, Divine Architecture and the Starseed Template, Matrix Memory Triggers for Ascension, and also has a wonderful YouTube channel with over 50,000 subscribers. So welcome, Magenta. The energies have been so incredibly intense, particularly last week, and I felt it myself, and I know a lot of people felt it. So can you sort of share some more about what's actually going on right now and how we can navigate these energies and our life with more grace and ease and to sort of stay in vibrational alignment as much as we can?
Yes, well, the 9 came forward to speak to me about the equinox energies. So the equinox fell around or on the 20th of March, and they came forward to explain that this is a golden gateway, because what's actually happening within the body is a reconstruction or recoding within the DNA that takes us into a frequency that they call the golden mean. So if you look at the golden mean frequency, the Fibonacci sequence, it's a certain mathematical code or tone. It matches with the emotion of bliss, and we are all being sort of recalibrated or upgraded so that our DNA holds this frequency, this golden mean frequency, which is why they called it the Golden Gateway. And this was occurring on the equinox, with the equinox being the highest point, but this energy was prior to the equinox, the days leading up to, and also afterwards. So, I mean, we're still in that energy now. It was very much a March energy, the whole of the month of March. But this isn't something that is going away. This tends to be coming in waves. So we're moving up into this intense sort of spike. And interestingly, with this particular energy, what I am shown, more star seeds than ever felt this energy raise.
Oh, so, yes, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we've been going through these spikes for some time, and you know, looking back, I don't know, about 2005, 2006, 2007, there were a few even before that could feel these energy raises. By 2012, obviously 2011, 2012, we had lots of people that were collectively going through this, but now, you know, here in 2018 and this particular equinox, there are this sort of collective, if you like, of individuals that the 9 call the starseeds, the light workers. They are the same individuals that have been feeling these energy raises, but it's almost been like it's been pushed, and we've now got people who wouldn't necessarily consider themselves as a starseed or a light worker or following any kind of religious or spiritual following. They're just considering themselves ordinary people, and they may not even have heard of the ascension or heard of energy frequencies or anything, and they're still feeling this energy and interpreting it. So it's very, very widespread, going into the people who would perhaps consider themselves to be linear 3D people. Looking at these people, they're having this sort of light beamed upon them like a big beacon, and they're responding. The DNA changes are occurring within people that have not done any of this study or that have never had any of these experiences. I mean, it's happening to everybody. The 9 say that there are some people that are sort of blocked from being able to allow these light codes to actually wash through the DNA, because there's so much trauma there and there are so many issues there, and that could be coming in from many, many different areas. It doesn't have to be just trauma. It can be lifestyle and food and everything. So some people are blocked. However, if this light continually washes over them, it does actually open up eventually so that these DNA codes are able to activate. But it happens for those people in a very different way. It can happen for those people where they're emotionally confused or depressed, or just feeling that they're failing in some way because their life is going crazy. Then there are other people who are actually responding really, really well to these codes. These are still 3D thinking people, haven't necessarily followed a spiritual path in life in any conscious way, but they're actually going with this flow quite well. And these people will eventually be led to some kind of information that will assist them, whether it's through their own connection or whether it's through finding the light worker community or whatever it may be. And then, of course, you've got the conscious star seeds that are riding this situation very well, even though they may not necessarily think that. Some star seeds are actually thinking, oh dear, I'm not coping with this energy at all, but they actually are doing really well. So yeah, that's what's happening. We're being recalibrated and recoded so that our DNA structure vibrates at a much higher frequency than it has done before on this planet. And as this collectively occurs, it changes the very dimension on this planet. This planet becomes a higher dimensional planet. And you've probably heard me talk before about the 3D Earth and the 5D Earth, and that's really the metaphor here. And it's more than a metaphor. It's actually a tangible two-world split situation. So you've got these people that are encased within this third dimensional reality within their consciousness and their existence, and then you've got these people that are living within this fifth dimensional reality, and they're the people that are responding to this recalibration within the DNA. They're the people that are moving into this golden mean frequency. So we're going up, and we can sort of hit this golden mean frequency. If we understand how to ride these waves and we are able to flow bliss through our system, we can get sort of right up to the top of this frequency wave, if you like. But many of us are learning how to deal with these emotions, because as you go upwards to this bliss activation, it can draw out everything else. So if there's other stuff there like anger and depression and despair, it can draw that out, which is why working with the shadow aspect is so important. The nine also say to me, what goes up also goes down. So we must be aware that as we're going up to this very high bliss activation of golden mean, we are digging deep and going down at the same time, and that we're learning to balance these two aspects of ourselves. So it's not really a case of accessing, the bliss of heaven and the dark evil of hell. That's not the metaphor that we want to hold within our awareness. And it's difficult to relate these concepts in actual language, because these are energy frequency concepts. So different people, different conduits will use different expression and different words to explain these frequencies. But what the nine say to me is, if you use the metaphor of going up to this bliss activation, the downward spiral, the downward balance to that high bliss spike, it's good to see that as, when I say the shadow, I don't mean, evil hell. I mean the dark forest. It's just as exciting and just as beautiful. If you imagine the higher bliss spike to be the sun, and the clouds and the heavens and the light, and then you imagine the match, the lower match, being the dark forest that's magical and grounding and also beautiful, because there you've got elves and fairies and little homes built inside the trunks of trees, and you've got interesting plants growing in the floor of the forest. If you can get these different fifth dimensional imaginary metaphors going, that's a perfect match to what's happening within the body, which is a matching frequency. And if you can get them both on the positive side, the 9 say positive light and positive darkness, then this will assist you to flow through this experience. But that's not to say that you are failing if you are not flowing through this experience, because everybody's doing this in a completely different and unique way, even though we're all doing it together.
That's a wonderful way of explaining it, because last week it was just a roller coaster, emotional roller coaster every day, and it's like, oh my God, it almost felt like it was never going to stop with all this sadness and grief. But like you said, it's like if you're reaching those higher frequencies, and you have to go down, and you have to, go down into the dark forest, and to heal the wounded parts of us, like as a child, and also in your past life. Whereas I think sometimes when we say shadow, it's like, I think just even the word, the vibration of shadow, it's like, ooh, but really it's just parts of us, isn't it, that we have that have been wounded, or that we've rejected, because it's been in trauma.
Yes, absolutely. If you look at the story of Peter Pan, and he had his shadow, and he had to sort of sew his shadow back on, or, that's just one metaphor that comes to mind as you were speaking. Yes, the shadow needs to be integrated. It doesn't, if you try to transcend it, what you're doing is you're taking the bliss spike and you're going into that higher heaven realms of light, and you will get higher dimensional information, and you will still recode the DNA structure into that golden mean frequency, but after a while there'll be a crash down. You have to come back down, and you'll come down with a bump, you'll come down with a fall, and then you can be very much thinking, why has everything gone wrong? Why have I failed? I'm no longer my loving spiritual self because this has happened or that's happened. And then that can lead to ungrounded behavior, sometimes even dangerous behavior, when people just can't cope with the fact that they had that love and bliss and they want that love and bliss back. It's an unbalanced way of awakening. It must go in both directions. So as you raise high, you dig deep at the same time. And really, you don't need to do any particular work. If you are just going with the flow of this, and that could actually be regular meditation, it could be yoga, it could be listening to uplifting videos or music or reading, whatever it may be. This does happen naturally. And if you're in connection with the higher self, or with some aspect of yourself, or whatever it may be, ascended master guide, ET guide, whatever, they will help you, they will guide you, so that when you go through these things, you can say to your guidance system, what's happening to me now? And they'll tell you. So that's why it's important to get in touch with the higher self, or to find a way to communicate with deeper aspects of yourself, and to not restrict yourself and think, well, that can't be true and that can't be right, or I did that bit wrong, and just relax and flow. In the information that came through from the 9 about the equinox on the 20th of March that we've just been through, they actually cited 2 methods that were quite important to deal with right now, and one was grounding and the other's relaxation. And what they mean by relaxation is exactly that, relaxation, but they don't just mean lie down and close your eyes and relax, or sit in a spa and do whatever it takes to relax your body. They are talking about relaxing into the consciousness concepts that we give ourselves, like, for example, desperation. Like, I need this. I need to find my twin flame. I need to find my twin flame by next month, or I have completely failed my mission. I've got to find him, etc. That is the opposite of relaxation. And what they mean is relax into it. And what they mean is, it doesn't matter if I find my twin flame or not, because I'm my twin flame, and everyone can be my twin flame. And the twin flame energy and the twin flame consciousness is around me and within me. Therefore, I will naturally attract to myself that match. So it's relaxing into these concepts. I'm just taking the twin flame as an example. So that's what they mean by relaxation. And then, of course, grounding, as in, so important to be grounded, because with these high energy spikes, these waves, it's very easy to become ungrounded, especially if you haven't really, if this hasn't happened to you before and it's something new. So when you go into these energy spikes and you feel this energy, some people can get a great sense of urgency, and it's very much like something massive is happening on this planet right now, and I need to tell everyone. And then they'll go on the internet and they'll create a video or they'll write something and they'll say something massive is happening right now and it's urgent that every single person on the planet listen to me. And because they've gone into this urgency, if that can actually take them into an ungrounded state, and then they might be misinterpreting the frequencies that they're getting. It's urgent, yes, but that urgency doesn't mean we need to do something right now. What the urgency is that is the feeling that we have when we're raising in frequency. It's that the feeling is something big is happening. Well, yes, something big is happening. Our DNA is being recalibrated and we are raising into this higher frequency. And what's happening to our body is huge. But we must stay grounded with this. If we go into urgency, like, oh, you wouldn't believe what's happening to me. Oh, my goodness, my DNA is changing. You know, that sort of thing. What we need to do is go into, this is normal. This is natural. This happens to every single human being at a certain part in their evolution. This happens to every planet and every collective. This is evolution. It goes in waves. There are spikes and there are falls, and there are spikes and there are falls. Waves. That's how the pattern of reality goes, and we flow through it. But at the same time, we don't want to go into, and there's another way we can go into when we're ungrounded, and that's very much to sort of opt out. And we can go into this, well, I don't need to do anything because I'm in a state of flow. So all I need to do is flow. That's inaction. So we need to find a very delicate balance between going with the flow and completely surrendering, and at the same time taking action and doing research and whatever else it may take, at the same time of being fully grounded within the third dimensional linear reality, and at the same time expanding into this beautiful wave. And it's a very delicate balance. And when you have that balance, and you have to work at it, but at the same time you don't have to work at it. It's like some people will say to me, it's easy. It's easy to go through these energy spikes. You know, it's just easy. They are correct from one level. Other people might say, I'm finding this so difficult. It's so hard. And the people who think it's easy will think, well, you're not doing it right. And the people who are struggling and thinking these energy spikes are really getting to me, but they might look at the people who are saying it's easy and think, well, they're flying on a fluffy cloud and they've not got it right. This is a delicate balance of both of these. On one level, this is very easy because we're flowing. And the level of it being easy is the memory of knowing that this is natural and normal and this happens to all planetary systems and that we've done this before, so we can flow through it. But the other side of it is we're new at this. This is the first time we've ascended in this physical life. So therefore, and on this planet, on Earth, there hasn't been an ascension since the beginning of our known history in this particular time period. Yes, there's been ascensions on this planet before that, but I'm looking at this particular section of time that we're in now. It's the first time we've done this, and it's the first time we've done this in this way at all. So there are all these different ways of looking at what is happening, and no one's getting it wrong or getting it right. We're all finding ways to integrate this into our own system. And what's so interesting is there's a huge collective that are going through integration. Ideally, it would be everyone on this planet, but it doesn't look as though that will be the case, that it's everyone. But there is a huge, huge collective going through integration. And yet each one of those people are going through the integration in a very unique and individual way. So all we can do is share our experiences of that integration that will help others to go through their integration. But none of us have got the absolute answer or the absolute right way or the absolute code, because those codes are unique to each individual.
That's really good to hear. And that brings us on to like the subject of spiritual bypassing. I'd love for you to share about spiritual bypassing, because it's like using spiritual practices and beliefs to avoid pain and wounds, but not necessarily obviously consciously doing it, but maybe sort of unconsciously doing that. And I have to say, I'm very guilty of that. I didn't do it consciously, but when I set out on the spiritual path, for me it's all about love and light and everything else. And I think like when we're on that spiritual path initially, we feel we can love and light our way to healing, and we don't need to, experience, go through, feel any traumas as a child or in past lives. We can just use love and light with everything. And I think sometimes some spiritual teachers teach that, or you believe it. So can you share more about that, Magenta? And if you've done that as well.
Yeah, I can do, and yes, I have. But spiritual bypassing is very much the same thing as going up to this energy spike, reaching that point of bliss without going down into the dark forest at the same time. That's basically the same thing. So yes, with me, I mean, I woke up spiritually back in 1993, and that's exactly what I did. I just learned very, very quickly through my communication with the nine and through my awakening. I learned very, very quickly about the higher dimensions and the love and the light, and I understood all these higher dimensional concepts, but I hadn't gone down at the same time. I came down to earth with a huge bump. This is what I'm talking about. You can go up to this spike and think, that's it. Yeah. I've done it. And I actually did think, I've done it. Yeah, and I would think, well, what's the point of me even staying on this planet now? I've learned everything that there is to know. There's no point in staying on Earth. This is the ungrounded, and obviously, of course, I went through these things, or I wouldn't be able to teach other people now if I hadn't gone through all these things myself. And I mean, honestly, I remember standing on the cliff top, down by the beach and sort of shouting out to the ETs, come and get me. Don't leave me here. I've done the work now. And I really expected a spaceship to just come flying out behind a cloud, land and pick me up and take me off to some other planet. And when it didn't happen, I'd go home upset and think, why didn't the ETs come and get me? So this is ungrounded thinking on the one hand, but what I will say is this is quite normal as well for a beginner. And I don't mean beginner in a derogatory sense. We all have to be beginners when we start waking up. We're not beginners. Every starseed is an advanced, wise soul that has done this again and again and again, traveling through different galaxies and through different planetary systems to come to Earth and to assist them to go through this process. But in a third dimensional sense, in this physical body, we're beginners when we wake up. We're spiritual babies. And, we need to understand that there are certain things we will go through, and one of them is spiritual bypassing. We don't understand that the darkness and the shadow is important. We reject it because we go into the spiritual concept of love and light, and it's so expansive and beautiful. And when we're there, we think to ourselves, this is it. This is the place. It can't be anywhere else. It's certainly not fear. Goodness me, we need to reject fear and get rid of it completely. We just need love and light. And of course, whenever we feel any fear or anger or jealousy or depression or envy or whatever it may be, we will then berate ourselves and say, I've failed, I've done it wrong, I should never have felt that fear. I remember talking to this medium. I mean, I was a beginner. I think I'd been awakened for, I don't know, how long, probably just 3 or 4 months. And yes, I was learning quickly and picking up concepts very quickly and channeling and having good connection then. And things went fast for me, fast tracking. But I remember meeting this medium who'd been in the spiritual movement for a good 40 odd years. And I was speaking to him and I was explaining how I've let go of all these negative emotions. I don't feel fear or sadness or anger. It's just completely gone. And it was true at the time. I really had transcended them. I believed that I had got rid of them completely and that I would never feel them again. And I remembered this medium who was, I don't know, he must have been in his 60s or something, very wise man. He looked at me and smiled. And, the look in his eyes was very indulgent. And he looked at me as though I was someone who highly likely he's going to get it one day, but she's not quite got it yet. And I did not understand his look, because I knew how he was looking at me. I'm thinking, why is he looking at me like that? I felt I was above him. I'd gone way above him, because he was, still talking about anger and fear and everything, and I let go of it all. And so I thought, I mean, what was I like in my, I think I was like, I don't know, I must have been in my late 20s at the time. It's funny, really, but it's not about age, by the way. It's about the time period in your life and where you're going, because there are people now in their early teens who are kind of getting the full picture of ascension. But anyway, so this guy looked at me and he said, so you don't feel fear? And I went, no. And you don't feel anger, and you don't feel jealousy or rage or any of these things? I said, no, I don't. I just feel pure love. And he said, well, I take my hat off to you. He said, you've done really well. He said, how long have you been in this, movement? How long have you been thinking this way? Just 3 months? Wow, you are amazing. I mean, you are just a fantastic guru or something like this. He said, I've been in this movement for 40 years. And I remember thinking, is he like serious, or is he like teasing me in some way? I mean, he was great, really, and I really thank him, because he did make me go away and think. But it took me quite a while, I have to say, of constantly, and I was at that time, I wasn't with the 9, I was with a 5th dimensional entity who called himself White Spirit. And you see, they will teach us very in accordance to where we are. There's no way that White Spirit would have said, look, you need to get down to the shadow and start sort of delving deep and stop spiritual bypassing. They don't talk to you like that. The guides are working with you where you are. And back then we didn't have the internet, so I couldn't go online and sort of type in something and then find a video from someone else and learn. I would have to sort of, go to the bookshop and see what I could scramble up, or find something in the library or whatever. And they come in to teach you at your own pace. So someone who's spiritual bypassing isn't doing anything wrong. Their guidance system, if they've even made that connection, some people are spiritual bypassing and haven't made a connection with the guides, but those guides are there because it's your matrix field. So that aspect of you is not going to rush in and tell you where you're going wrong. It will happen through your life, and it will be a series of events. Back then in 93, the energy was much slower. It was not this intensity that it is now, although I did go through an intense period, which I was told was a rehearsal for the actual performance, meaning the actual ascension. And through my life and through things that happened, I continually had these crash downs. I was continually brought down to earth with a bump and it happened again and again and again, until finally I thought, there's something I'm not getting. And eventually, obviously, I then discovered that this is not, that there was a lot more work to be done, and I hadn't got it at all. I'd got one part of it. I'd managed to get up to that bliss spike, and now I needed to go down and find out, well, what's down there? That's the big question we should be asking ourselves with ascension. Yeah. What's down there? A lot of us know what's up there.
Definitely.
So...
Yes, thank you for sharing that, because it's like I really resonate with what you've shared, because I remember thinking, like, when I was in those high vibrations of that love and light and bliss, and then when you have these huge, like, roller coaster waves that come and you go right down, you can feel like a failure and feel like, oh my God, what's happened? I'm obviously not in alignment. I need to do this, I need to do that. But really, it's natural, isn't it? And so I think you're right with ascension. It's wonderful, but I think what can be missing from ascension, and maybe not always taught, or there's not lots of information about, is to have that balance, that divine balance, isn't it? So that, yes, you go up, but you've also got to come down. And I think you really explained it beautifully, Magenta, about when you go up into these beautiful high waves of energies, high frequencies, you have to come down into that dark forest. And to integrate and to embody, and it is another aspect of ourselves that we've rejected. And if we keep rejecting that, we keep attracting that. So if we've rejected like fear or whatever, we keep attracting it, don't we, in different forms and
exactly.
Those patterns.
Exactly. It keeps coming back in different forms again and again until you finally begin to integrate. And that's what it's all about. You said divine balance, and you couldn't say it better. That's a perfect way of explaining it. And it's all about integration, and divine balance will give you that integration. What can also happen with spiritual bypassing is you can actually bypass that completely off yourself and superimpose it onto somebody else. I remember back in the this would have been, I don't know, I think possibly the mid-90s. There was this fantastic teacher that we'd all heard about, who was living in Glastonbury. Everybody in the local spiritual community at the time wanted to go and see this amazing teacher. And people would go down and see this teacher in Glastonbury, and she'd do this amazing session. I mean, obviously this is happening all over now, but back then in the UK, Glastonbury was kind of the place, and there might be one or two really well-known teachers there that everybody wanted to go and see. And what was actually happening is people were going to see this teacher and having this amazing session with her. And then a few days after the session, when they're back home, they'd have this awful crash down where everything would go wrong. And a great many of us at the time were then blaming the teacher and thinking, well, the spiritual teacher's doing something to us. So she's helped us to open up and take us to this massively amazing, blissful place. But it doesn't last, because 3 days later we're getting a crash down. And I believe that too. I remember thinking it's obviously the teacher. It was a while before I realized it's not the teacher, it's not the book you just read, or the video you watched, or the music you're listening to, or the massage you just had. It's not that. It's the raise in frequency that's taking you to that spike, and you have not created the divine balance and the integration. And the crash down is not a punishment or a bad thing. It's not like, oh, you're walking along in this blissful place and somebody sticks their foot out so you trip up and fall flat on your face, and the guides are thinking, aha. That's not it at all. This is your own reality, the matrix, bringing you to the energies that you need to integrate. So when you have a crash down, something needs your attention. It's trying to grab your attention. What is it that needs your attention? It will be different for everyone. It's usually something somewhere that you are in a state of not transcendence and getting rid of, but actually bypassing, which is a perfect word to explain it. What is it that needs integrating? And it could be something. It's usually something, even if it's a past life thing. And it's very easy. Again, this is spiritual bypassing by saying, oh, it's past life stuff. It's very easy to say, oh, it's past life stuff.
Yes, that's so true,
Yeah, it's nothing in this life. It's nothing I've done in this life or that I haven't done in this. Oh, it's from my life back in, the 1300s or whatever. Yes, that may well be true, but it will be connected to something in this life. It doesn't work like that where you've only got past life stuff to deal with. It's a reflection of what's happening in this life. Everything comes back to this life, which is why if somebody hasn't got to that point of understanding, I'm not a great fan of past life regression therapy, because it's taking you to the past life, which is great, but unless you realize that that is a mirror to where you are now, you are not going to get the benefit.
Yeah, you're just sort of avoiding it, aren't you, by doing that?
Yes.
But so Magenta, I wanted to ask you, because I'm very guilty of this, I don't do it now, but once I was, sort of came onto the spiritual path, and I'd have all these high vibrations, but then when have all these roller coaster waves, it'd be like, I need to clear it, I need to clear it, I need to clear it. So I would be either training in a different modality or something, or I'd be finding a great healer, a teacher, need to clear it, need to clear it, need to get rid of it. But really, that's bullshit, really, because what it is, it's like, that's like you're rejecting that part of you, and all it wants to be felt, it wants to be embraced and integrated. Can you relate to that, where you just think, I want to get rid of it, I've got to heal it, got to clear it? We miss out that part of, can you sort of share more about that, Magenta?
Yes, I mean, that's what I was saying earlier about the desperation when the 9 came forward with the equinox channeling, and they were talking about
Yeah.
relaxation. That's the opposite of relaxation. That's what they meant by relaxation, even though they do mean actual relaxation in the way that we would interpret it. They're talking about the relaxation of the consciousness. The desperation is, I need to clear it. I need to clear this. I need to clear that. I need to do this right now. Oh my goodness me, it's Tuesday. I should have cleared that by 4 o'clock Tuesday afternoon, and I haven't. That's the desperation. It's like, relax. You have all the time in the world. This is the thing that's so difficult, and this is where we have to find that divine balance. And I keep coming back to that you said divine balance, because it's so important. We can have this urgency, as in we've not got much time. You know, it's like 2018. Oh my goodness, you know, the cabal needs to be brought down, 3D needs to be dismantled, the truth needs to come out, and we need to ascend and get to 5D. And we're late, you know, we are really late. And there's so much work to be done, and we haven't got enough time to do it in, and then we will go into complete panic and meltdown. And that's one energy that's there. Because yes, we are definitely, you know, in linear time. We experience time, so we can look at everything and think, oh my goodness me, there's so much work to be done. How are we going to get it into this one lifetime kind of thing? But then the truth of the matter, which is coming from the 5D world, is relaxation. And the relaxation is, you have plenty of time. You have all the time in the world. Why? Because there is no such thing as time. There is only one moment. So that's when you talk about, I need to clear it, I need to clear it, I need to clear it. If you can get into this, okay, you can get into one way of thinking could be, I am clear. The other way of thinking could be, it doesn't matter whether I'm clear or not. Another way of thinking is, I don't need to clear this because it's teaching me something. So it's finding these concepts, these ways of thinking that will take you into that relaxation. But that does not mean that you let go of that urgency, because that urgency, that's the indigo frequency. It's the energy of action. And unless we're there, we aren't going to do the work, because we can think, I've got all the time in the world. I don't need to do anything. I don't need to clear a thing. All I need to do is just sit here in bliss and just float. You know, so we need to get the balance. And as I said, I'm interpreting frequency and energy here. So different teachers will use different words to explain what it is they're picking up. But the frequency is, you know, speaking in a more sort of metaphoric sense, in the way the 9 would talk about this, the indigo in the crystal. So the indigo is, I need to take action. I need to find out the truth now. I need to do whatever I can to make sure that this world is a safe place for my great-great-great-grandchildren to grow up in. That's the indigo energy. It's about action. You are a warrior. You are drawing your sword high, and you are saying no more to control, and you are saying, we are going into the light, and we are not going to have a planet that is full of darkness and corruption, etc. That's the indigo energy, and it's very important. And then you have the crystal energy, which is the, you know, I'm here to be, I'm here to feel, I'm here to project energy and allow energy to flow through me. And both of these energies are so important right now. And the thing is, how it's been done on a incarnational level is, we've got a whole bunch of starseeds that are indigos predominantly, and a whole bunch of starseeds that are crystals predominantly. So they have different ways of dealing with these ascension frequencies. And if we are not careful, the indigos and crystals can be turned against one another, and then we go into separation. And there is that happening. I've seen evidence of this. So you've got indigos saying, let's say, for example, they're talking about the control structure. They might say the Illuminati are bad and evil. And from an indigo perspective, they won't accept anything else. From an indigo perspective, it's they're bad, they're evil, they need to be stopped. You know, why should we forgive them? They've destroyed us, etc., etc. We're not going to forgive them. That's simply the way an indigo person, someone holding high indigo energy, that has come here as a warrior, that is how they will interpret the energetic. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It's simply their own subjective interpretation of the energy. And then let's take that same example, the Illuminati are bad and evil. The crystals will be, yes, but we need to forgive them. Because if we don't forgive them, then we're not going to be able to move into unity and oneness because they are us. The crystal energy is not wrong either. That's simply the way of interpreting that energy in a predominantly crystal individual that's come here to be, to flow, and to heal. What we need to do to integrate, to get the divine balance, is to work with the indigo aspect of ourselves and the crystal aspects. Now, from an indigo point of view, I know because I'm indigo, it's not easy to access the crystal part of us because we are warriors and we want to fight, if you like. We want to stand strong and defeat the darkness and be the hero and make everything okay. We can't stand lies. We can't stand cruelty on any level. You know, the indigos are pure. They are for what is right and what is in alignment, and they will do whatever it takes to get that. And it's hard for them to flow in this crystalline bubble because from their perspective, that looks like spiritual bypassing, and they would be correct. But then from the crystalline point of view, they're looking at the indigos and think, well, why are you fighting? Why are you having a battle? Why are you in some kind of war? Why are you angry? Why are you drawing your sword? Why have you even got a sword? That's how they would think, because they are here to flow and be peaceful and loving and to heal, and they are just as right. So we must get the balance of both. And for people who are very predominantly indigo, it's incredibly important now for them to embrace that crystal flow. And for people who are flowing with a crystal energy, it's very, very important for them to embrace part of the indigo, because the indigo brings with it confidence and strength. And the crystal side to that can be lack of self-esteem and sometimes emotional weakness. That's the sort of negative side to it. But on a positive level, the crystals have this beautiful humility, which is not lack of ego, and it's not being a victim, it's being humble and being in surrender and not thinking of themselves as above anyone else. That's a very, very wonderful crystal trait, which the indigos could learn from, because they can very easily go into ego, and often they do, especially when they move into a spiritual way of thinking. They can think, you know, that's it. I'm sort of above the rest of the world because I've got this access to this higher dimensional information. Therefore, I'm better than all them, and they can go off into ego, and that's not integration either. So it's about getting the balance between the indigo and the crystal side. And as I said, I'm just using different metaphors to explain frequency. This can be explained in many, many different ways, and is. But right now, it's really important for the physically incarnated indigos and the physically incarnated crystals to come together. And it's very important for us as individuals to balance the indigo and the crystal energy within ourselves. And I'm only talking here about two energies. There are many, many different frequencies and different energies that we have to integrate. But the indigo and the crystal are two that are very predominant, that will help us to go through this ascension process and all these energy spikes and all these frequencies that we're feeling. If we can go through them with the balance and the perspective of the indigo and the crystal, then we've got some really good tools to assist us to go through these waves.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, because that's a beautiful way of explaining that, because it's almost like, you know, like you have to embrace and embody the indigo energy, because then you can take action. And it's like if you stay just in the crystalline energy, then you just, it's all this love, grace and light, and you don't feel you need to go and look at the shadows, or you don't want to look at that part to you know, to be integrated and healed. Whereas the indigo really sort of inspires you and guides you to take action. So it feels like it feels like the crystal energy has sort of like the divine feminine aspect maybe, and that the indigo aspect has more of a divine masculine. That's not sort of stepping it in stone saying this is masculine, that's feminine, but it feels like those qualities. Does that kind of like resonate, Magenta?
That's exactly how it is. Yes, that's another way of saying it. The sacred masculine and the divine feminine. That's the balance within ourselves. This is alchemy. You know, we are balancing. We're going through this divine marriage. So yes, the crystal would be more feminine. The indigo would be more masculine. It's when you use words like feminine and masculine in a spiritual sense, you are talking about frequency and energy. Therefore, indigo, crystal, or masculine, feminine fit in exactly the same way. The problem is when you use masculine and feminine, and then you've got people who are within a linear third dimensional way of thinking, then they misinterpret that and think it means male and female, and think it means gender, and it doesn't. Gender and sexuality and male and female biology is completely different to the divine feminine and the sacred masculine, which is the indigo crystal. And it's also another way of looking at this is it's the Christ, spelt Kryst, and the Sophia. This is the higher. I mean, indigo and crystal is kind of fifth dimensional, I guess. If you had to give it a dimensional way of explaining, divine feminine, sacred masculine would be fifth dimensional. Male and female would be 3D. You could sort of put that into 4D. But if you want to go higher into sixth, seventh dimensional terminology, then you would use Christ and Sophia, because these are higher frequency terminology, higher frequency words, because every word has a code. So if I were to say to you male and female, there's a code in that, and you'll catch that code, which is going to be a 3D code. And the interpretation is going to be, and it needs to be a 3D code. We need to have 3D codes in order to be able to make sense of our reality. So that's the brain, the interface decoding frequency into a third dimensional linear sense. But if we say divine feminine, sacred masculine, we have a 5D code there. If we say indigo and crystal, we have a higher 5D code. When we speak about the Christ and Sophia and the Emerald City of Crystal, which is the same thing, we are looking at higher potentially sixth dimensional, and maybe even into seventh sometimes, we're getting codes. So when you say the Christ Sophia, they are the bliss codes. Those words hold the bliss codes. So when you're talking to someone in 3D or even in 4D, and they have not expanded their thinking into 5D or higher, they won't understand what you mean when you say the Christ Sophia bliss codes, because they are higher dimensional interpretations of higher dimensional codes. And only those who are accessing that reality, which will be predominantly all the people listening to your show, they will know what that means. So when I say to them the Christ Sophia, it's not a word, it's a feeling. They will just hold the feeling within, and they will feel Christ Sophia. Oh my goodness, I feel what Magenta is saying here. And this comes from the 9, the Christ Sophia, and other higher guides. And then there are other words as well that hold that code. There's the diamond light. There's the diamond light frequency. That's the same thing. There is the codes from Atlantis, which are slightly different, but they're still potentially in the same place, not quite. And then you have the Avalonian codes, which have a different frequency as well. And then you've got Arcturus, the Arcturian codes, that they're slightly different, but they're all in that place. But the Christ Sophia is extremely high and up there with the diamond frequency, the platinum ray. These are all codes. So that's a way to explain the masculine, the feminine, the indigo crystal, just different words that hold different codes that will give understanding to people who are at different stages of expansion and awakening. But yes, it's the divine feminine and the sacred masculine is exactly the same.
That's wonderful. Thank you for explaining that. And so it's the other thing I feel like when people sort of step onto that ascension path is that they just want to get rid of the 3D world. I must admit, when I first did it, I thought I don't want anything to do with 3D. I want to stay out of it, and I just wanted to stay up into the the higher dimensions and stuff. And again, that's spiritual bypassing, isn't it? And so it is more about, and also that can mean that you stay out of your body, but really it is about being in your body, isn't it? Being we're spiritual beings that are human bodies, so it's also learning to sort of navigate, like you said about the divine balance. I think it's also having a divine balance with the 3D and let's say the high dimensional world. Would you say that's true?
Yes.
Rather than rejecting, it's almost like we're using the 3D, or we can use the 3D world as a shadow, and the 5D world is like this bliss, love, and light. But in order to navigate it with more grace and ease, it's about having that divine balance of the 3D and the 5D, isn't it?
Yes. Well, yes, and this is about interpreting this frequency. And as I said, different conduits and channels, different spiritual teachers, different aware individuals that are connected to that higher dimensional flow will use different metaphors. So, for example, say I were to say, using a different metaphor, say I were to try to explain a frequency concept and frequency codes by saying the 3D world is the shadow and the 5D world is love and light. Now,
probably should have said that.
Yeah, well, no, but what I'm saying here is that is not necessarily an incorrect metaphor, depending on the perspective that's going on within that particular person. For me, I work with what the 9 have taught me, and I understand that saying the 3D world is the shadow and the 5D world is love and light is going to be confusing and potentially misleading. However, it isn't incorrect depending on the perspective, and also going on about the rejection of 3D and how that is spiritual bypassing. Well, yes, that's true, but in some cases, spiritual bypassing itself, especially when you're rejecting 3D completely, is not necessarily a bad thing. It may very well be a life-saving thing for you, depending on what you're going through. Let's take the example of a child who's being abused. If that child rejects 3D and goes straight to the higher dimensions by fully spiritually bypassing everything, including the body, and comes out of the body, that person is using a safety mechanism that is a form of protection against the abuse. Now, if that child stays there, if that child stays for the rest of his or her life as a spiritually bypassing and rejecting 3D, then they aren't going to be able to integrate and go through ascension in balance. They will probably become dissociated and have, problems in that area, and could potentially lead to extreme depression and lots of crash downs. But in that moment when that young 7-year-old child is being abused, spiritual bypassing is a protective tool, potentially an essential tool. So spiritual bypassing is not bad per se. It is a tool in the moment to be used. And it will happen naturally because that's what the brain does. It's just whether we stay there, and of course, spiritual bypassing as a result of physical abuse or emotional or spiritual abuse is one of the ways that the controllers, the cabal, etc., use to actually create a defragmented humanity, because a defragmented humanity is then not going to ascend and is feeding lower, darker energies and putting them in control, etc., etc. So they use spiritual bypassing and physical bypassing. So it can be a negative thing, but in that moment, it's a safety mechanism. So it depends, where is the person that's using spiritual bypassing? Now, if somebody's teaching from a higher dimensional point of view and is spiritual bypassing, if someone is out there teaching, get rid of fear. Don't let yourself feel fear. The minute you feel fear, give yourself a slap on the wrist or whatever and get meditating.
Or go into love and light.
Get your gold crystal necklace on immediately and tell yourself that is potentially a very unbalanced teaching. So someone who is teaching from that point of view, on the one hand, from a third dimensional point of view, we could say that person shouldn't be teaching. But from a quantum level, from a higher dimensional or multidimensional level, that teacher is doing us a favor, because that teacher is showing us one way of how not to teach a balanced ascension. We have to have these teachers that are teaching in a distorted way in order for us to see the distortion. And what I'm saying here is every starseed has a mission. Every starseed has planned out this blueprint prior to their birth. And if you look at all the blueprints of all the starseeds and all the blueprints of all the humans on the whole planet, it's an absolute amazing genius work of creation, because everything is in sync. We are here to follow a mission, and that is part of the trust and part of the flow, because when you're on your mission, you will do what you are supposed to do, not using the word supposed to in a controlling way, as in you're following your blueprint. So there are many, many different reasons why things happen. And in the third dimension, in a linear way of thinking, people will assign one reason for why something is happening. So they might say, this child, these parents lost their child when their child was a baby because of this reason. One reason. Now, they might be quite correct. That one reason could be one of the reasons. But what the nines show me is it isn't one reason. It is a huge, complex map of all these different convergences coming in from all these different areas that converge together to create this one action. So on a third dimensional level, it's very easy to just translate that happened because of this. But the only way to truly find out the reasons behind why things happen is to go above the third dimension. So we need to go into the higher dimensions in order to find out why things happen. So it's very easy for a third dimensional person to just assign one reason to something. And what's happening in the spiritual communities is that there's still division there and duality there, as we are struggling for integration. And so we must all, if we are spiritually thinking individuals in any way, if we think of ourselves as spiritual and as starseeds, light workers, warriors, aware individuals, truthers, whatever word you want to give to us, if you believe that you are that kind of person, it's very important for you to try your hardest to look at the perspectives that are coming in from other people. If you decide to reject that perspective and think, well, that's nonsense, that's fine. But what the nine would say, whenever I've done that, whenever they've showed me a different perspective to my own, I'd say, well, that's nonsense. There's no reality where that perspective can possibly have any validity. And the nine will take me above to the next dimension, and then they will show me, and I'll think, oh, right, okay, so that perspective does have validity in this scenario, within this dimensional point of view. So what I'm saying here is all the starseeds have validity. They're starseeds. They're not here to destroy and to create destruction. They are here, the genuine service to others polarized starseeds are here to create unity, and yet they are arguing amongst themselves constantly. You only have to take Facebook and scroll through your wall to see these spiritual arguments that are going on left, right, and center. That's fine if it's part of integration, but we need to be careful that we do not continue to create this constant battle between the indigos and the crystals and the you know, the males and the females and the 5D and the 3D. We need to unify. And it's very easy to say, let's, you know, embrace unity. But what does that really mean? What does that really look like? Well, it looks like creating a unification within yourself. When you have done that, you will find it so much easier to create a unification with others, because no perspective is going to trigger you anymore, because you've dealt with it within yourself. Whereas if you're being triggered by other perspectives, then why? Does it mean that perspective, this is what I mean about spiritual bypassing and placing it onto someone else? It's like, well, that person's wrong. That person thinks this and they are wrong. Therefore, the reason why I'm feeling so bad and why I'm triggered is because of that person. They should never have had that thought. Their thought is what's triggered me. So it's their fault. Well, of course, this is completely inaccurate in the truth of reality. It's always about you. So if you're triggered, it's not that person that triggered you. Why are you triggered? Why are you feeling so bad by their viewpoint? I'm not talking about actual victim stuff here. If somebody comes up to you and hits you, then on the third dimensional level it's their fault, not yours. I'm not trying to make it sound like everything that happens to you is your fault, because on a third dimensional level that isn't true. Other people can actually infiltrate your boundaries and harm you and step over your boundaries and do things that they shouldn't do. That's correct in a third dimensional perspective. But what I mean here is, if someone else has a viewpoint that is triggering yours and making you angry or dig your heels in and feel, and this is very, very, very common in a spiritual sense. It's very much like that person is threatening my spiritual belief system. My spiritual belief system is this ascended master's good and this particular demon is bad. Anyone who says different, they're wrong. Well, that's because you've not integrated the ascended master and the demon within yourself. Because if you integrate them together, you will see that an ascended master and a demon are both ascended masters in the sense that they're there to teach you. And they can both be demons in the sense that they can mislead you. So you have to go through the integration yourself. And when you do that, other people's viewpoints won't trigger you, because you'll be able to see where they are coming from. And if you cannot see where they're coming from on a third dimensional level, go above that dimension and start looking with a fourth and, hopefully fifth, which is a perspective of the heart. Look with the higher dimensional viewpoint at where that person might be coming from. If we all did this in the spiritual community, we would begin to be united. And we all talk about unity, but unless you've unified yourself and your own integration, then you aren't going to be able to unify with the rest of the collective. And that's what we're here to do. And that's why these spikes are happening. They're unification spikes. The golden mean frequency within the DNA is a frequency of unity. And if we are struggling with these spikes, then that's not a bad thing. It's a mirror. It's a mirror saying, look, this needs to be integrated into the golden mean frequency. Look, the golden mean frequency is coming in this bit of DNA, and one needs to integrate this emotion. So it's a mirror if you are struggling with the spikes. If you are floating through these spikes constantly and you forgot to pay your bills, you forgot to do any shopping, you forgot to eat, well, then we need to look at some grounding. You need to get down to the 3D and start getting your shopping done. And you need to look at the integration there. So we're all working towards that divine balance in so many different ways.
That's very true, Magenta. And like the spiritual bypassing can also create, like spiritual egos and the separation and duality thinking like, one person feels they know best, or that teacher feels they know best, or they're teaching the truth. But like, unless you've integrated everything within you and unified yourself, like you said, then it's very easy to have a judgment on others, and including having a judgment on yourself. And also, it's really easy to be triggered and activated. I know if I'm ever triggered or activated, I always go within and I think, okay, what is it I need to learn here? What is it within me that needs to be embraced and integrated? Because I want to look at it and see what it is, and then feel into that, and then allow it to be released. And then what happens, the energy just changes, doesn't it? Because when you integrate that, then you just shift into, I don't want to say another vibration, you do shift into a high vibration, and you see things differently. And that person or that situation is so different because the energies change. But it's just been such a wonderful conversation with you, Magenta, because looking at everything in terms of this divine balance, creating divine balance with everything. It's like even if you're not spiritual or you're not on the spiritual path, it's really important to do that, isn't it? Because you're going to be less stressed. You're going to be happier, more joyful. You're going to be more abundant. You're going to be healthier. It's just very important, isn't it, to create this divine balance within yourself.
Absolutely, it is crucial. I mean, it is the path. It is the path of ascension, divine balance. And one thing that can really help us get there and move into these frequency places that we need to move into is perspective and how we interpret the energy. For example, you say, I don't really want to say shift into a higher perspective, but it is shifting into a higher perspective. Well, what you're doing when you're saying shifting into a higher perspective is you are interpreting frequency. You're interpreting frequency. Yeah, and you are interpreting frequency accurately. Shifting into a higher perspective is a very, very good use of terminology for that particular energy that's occurring. But you might say to somebody who is a 3D thinker, a linear thinker, I'm shifting into a higher perspective. And their interpretation may be, what you're saying is I'm holier than you, and I'm as high as Jesus, and you're down there as a lowly human. So it triggers them because they haven't interpreted what you said. The trouble is, someone who thinks in a linear sense in a 3D way, they haven't got the tools yet to be able to interpret in a multidimensional sense, because it takes using multi-tracked thinking. It actually is a different brainwave frequency. You have to activate certain neurons and synapses in the brain and in the DNA. You have to switch these codes on. It's like switching on a load of switches. If you haven't got those switches turned on, then you aren't going to be able to use that multi-tracked thinking. Therefore, you are not incorrect when you've made the interpretation that that person is saying, I'm holier than you, I'm up there with Jesus Christ, and you're down there and you're nothing. They're not wrong. Their interpretation's not wrong. It simply is the interpretation of the 3D linear thinking, given the experience that that person has gone through in their life, given the energetic makeup of that person. And then what happens is you have the spiritual person then saying, well, I didn't mean that. You've taken me the wrong way. What I meant was, and then instantly you're in an argument. So what I'm saying here is to find unity, we need perspective, and we need to understand the perspectives of those who are unable to use the higher multi-tracked thinking because they haven't switched on those DNA strands and they haven't activated those synapses. So we need to make allowances, which sounds very condescending, I know, but I'm interpreting frequency here. We need to make allowances for those who aren't able to do that. It doesn't mean they're lower than us. They're where we once were. They're where we might well be again. We're all equal on that level of oneness. But on a third dimensional sense, we are in different stages of evolution. And it is difficult for 3D thinking people to understand this because they will feel less than when you start talking about them as not having the capacity to understand what they all understand. So it cuts them out. It makes them feel as though they are completely shut out from you. So they feel completely ununified. And what you're actually doing is you are exaggerating and accentuating their separateness. So that divine balance is crucial, because if you're teaching one-on-one or assisting one-on-one or whatever, having a one-on-one conversation, it's quite easy to do that because you just work out where that person is. You make sure you don't say anything that's going to make them feel less than and that's going to accentuate and exaggerate their separateness. But when you are teaching in a group setting or on a global level, then that divine balance is crucial to get, because you are going to be speaking to many different people all at the same time who all have these different ways of thinking. And you have to do the absolute best you can. And unfortunately, you have to be aware that when you get to that level of teaching, you are going to trigger some people, even whilst you are doing your absolute best to be as fair as you can with your terminology. You're going to trigger some people, so you have to understand that and be aware that that's going to happen. And that's quite hard for people who are stepping up to global teacher level. And the reason why I say that is, let's take, for example, again, Facebook. There are many people who are teaching on Facebook simply by writing a status that is going to cause difference of opinion and expansion. I mean, I saw one the other day where somebody made a valid point, but that valid point was interpreted very differently in a third dimensional sense as it would be in a higher dimensional sense or a fifth dimensional sense. So obviously you had this huge debate going on. That person had done a good thing on one level because that's created expansion, but on another level, some people may have gone away and felt less than and had their separateness exaggerated. But from the responsibility of that individual, the reason why they were triggered is because they still have issues. And when I say still have, we all do still have. There are things that need looking at. So we've got responsibility to others in a spiritual sense, but ultimately our responsibility is only to ourselves.
Thank you, Magenta, for being on the show. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for sharing how to create divine balance within, and also the very important subject of spiritual bypassing, which I'm sure we could have continued for many hours. Thank you. And thank you to our wonderful listeners. May you all be inspired by Magenta's deep divine transmission and be activated to create the divine balance within. Many blessings and love.
Thank you, Crystalline. Thank you for inviting me on the show. It's been lovely, really lovely questions and great energy. Thank you again to all the listeners as well. Lots of love. Bye. We are now at a time in our planetary evolution known as ascension. Those individuals we can call starseeds are currently in their millions and are collectively going through this awakening process. In this book, the 9 bring forward memory triggers designed to act as a catalyst into the awakening process. They present a model of working with the individualized matrix field, known also as the Merkaba, through matrix architecture, Merkaba magic, and the golden triad of ascension, presenting an in-depth analysis and explanation of the twin flame consciousness and how this relates to the ascension, as well as providing triggers to the collective memory experience known as Atlantis. This transmission is designed to trigger your multidimensional memory as you begin the construction of the Merkaba matrix and embrace the inner archetype of the architect. The triggers contained within this material are there to assist you in accessing the codes for the new formation of the original crystalline DNA matrix. I, Magenta Pixie, am so happy to present this transmission to you from the White-Winged Collective Consciousness of 9, Divine Architecture and the Starseed Template.